Those against?
Russia vetoed the latest draft UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Sudan. Two other resolutions this year, one calling for a truce in Fasher and the other during the month of Ramadan, both passed with Russia's abstention from the vote. So where does this leave the people of Sudan? Welcome everyone, I'm Grace Kuriakanja and this is Africa Matters. Now, Sudan is facing the worst displacement conflict on the planet. Fighting between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces has dragged on for 19 months with no clear end in sight. The latest study by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine estimates that over 61,000 people have been killed in Khartoum state alone, which is where the fighting began, as a direct result of the violence or by starvation and diseases. And the UN says more than 11 million people, or 1 in every 5 people, has been displaced.
There is no good food, and there are a lot of diseases. There's no sleep, no safety. Even if you want to cook at home, you don't have the money to cover the costs of food. We used to depend on charity kitchens, but they're closed. We had nothing to eat. We have nothing to eat.
So let's take a quick look at what the UN draft resolution was calling for. It condemned the continued assault by the Rapid Support Forces in Fasher and demanded that it immediately halt all its attacks against civilians in Darfur, Al Jazeera State and Sennar State, and across Sudan. It also demanded that the Sudanese army and Rapid Support Forces honor and fully implement their commitments made in the Jeddah Declaration of Commitment to protect the civilians by minimizing civilian harm and avoiding using them as human shields. The UN draft was calling for an immediate end to hostilities and dialogue to work towards a national ceasefire, as well as humanitarian pauses and corridors that would allow safe movement of civilians and the delivery of adequate humanitarian aid. It also called on warring parties to protect civilian infrastructure like hospitals, schools, places of worship and humanitarian facilities, and the people running them in a way that's consistent with international humanitarian law.
We stand against any international or UN interventions or interference under the pretext of making peace according to outdated models, relying on hard power. We are in a position to contribute to devising a plan for sustainable peace and to protect civilians based on soft power and the will of the people.
We agree with all Security Council colleagues that the conflict in Sudan requires a swift resolution. It is also clear that the only way to achieve this is for the warring parties to agree to a ceasefire. We believe that the Security Council's role here is to help them to achieve this. However, this should be consistent and open and should not be done by imposing upon the Sudanese, through a council decision, the opinion of its individual members, flavored with their post-colonial flavorings, as to how the future country should be.
Right, let's hear more from Dalia Abdelmonem, who is a political analyst. She joins me from Cairo, Egypt. Thank you so much for joining us, Dalia. Straight to the very latest, just what is the impact of this veto on the UN resolution calling for a ceasefire in Sudan? What's the impact on the people themselves in Sudan?
Well, practically, in practical terms, in regards to the Sudanese population, it doesn't have much of an impact because we've had agreements before and we've had, peace discussions and nothing's been done. But in terms of the political spectrum and in the international community as a whole, it would have put the Sudanese conflict centralized it in terms of that the UN Security Council is now talking about it, and it has amplified the need for humanitarian protection of civilians and the need for a ceasefire in this war that's, like you said, has been going on for more than a year. But in terms of practicalities in regards to the Sudanese, they're still being assaulted, they're still being violated, they're still being killed. They're still needing humanitarian aid. They're still displaced. Nothing has changed on the ground. If anything, the RSF has amplified its attacks on civilians, especially in Al Jazeera and in Darfur, in particular with Fasher. So it wasn't going to stop the RSF or the army. However, it would have just centralized it and amplified the issue, and then would have allowed more discussions and more action being taken to find a solution to this conflict.
But then again, Talia, I still want to ask, so where does this leave the Sudanese people? They're watching, they're seeing all these developments. Just what happens to them? Where does this leave them?
I mean, the resolution has shown something. I mean, for me, and when I read what's happening, is that Sudan is going to be used as a tit for tat, play between Western countries and Russia, for example. And in the case of Russia, it plays into their hands because they're playing both sides. The Wagner Group has been proven and has been documented that they're supporting the RSF, and the Russian government is supporting the Sudanese army. And at the same time, the smuggling of gold from Sudan has never stopped, and that one of the main import countries of this smuggled gold is Russia. So what can be done is that this was a very, I'm not going to say it was a weak resolution, but it was a very general resolution, just talking about, what's best for civilians, protection of civilians. And if the international community can't even agree on something such as protection of civilians, then I don't know what else can be said, because there was nothing political. There was no calling out of any of the external actors or parties that are, fueling this war. There was no, demands, that were, such as putting in place a peacekeeping force. It was all very general terms, asking for better protection, for the idea that there are safe zones, that a hospital is a safe zone. And if the international communities, or in respect countries like Russia, cannot agree on that, then I don't know what else can be said about it. It was a slap in the, it was a slap in the face in a way, because we in the civic society sphere of Sudan were hoping that this resolution would be one step towards better protection of civilians, better access to humanitarian aid, and better, the availability of safe zones. So people, like in Jazeera alone, in the past week or so, more than 200,000 people have been displaced. The numbers just keep going up. There's no change. There's no that situation just keeps getting worse.
Right. Let's talk about another member of the P5, the United States, which tried or attempted to broker peace talks in August, but failed. So what do you think what will it take to bring these warring parties to the negotiation table and stop this fighting? What will it take?
The backers, the political backers and actors who are supporting both sides, they need to be involved more. They need to be called out. They need to be, the levers need to be used against them. Like, it's been documented that the RSF is supported by the United Arab Emirates, and SAF is supported by the Egyptian government, and to a certain extent the Saudi government. This is where their role comes in. They need to be a part of the process. It cannot just be the USA or the UK or the EU. They need to involve the other actors who can influence both sides. But the problem is that both sides believe they can win this war. And that has been the case since day one. They each think that they can win. And so far the RSF is still in control of the majority of the country. And though the army is pushing back, there hasn't been major victories for the army. Yet at the same time, Fasher, the fight over Fasher has been going on for more than a month now. And even though all analysis was that it would fall sooner or later, it's held out.
Right.
The coalition forces that are pro-SAF and SAF have managed to hold off the RSF. So there's been no let-up. But unless the supply of arms to both sides is halted one way or the other, and that supply chain is cut off, both sides will continue with this war. And at the same time, the continuation of this war plays into the hands of actors who want this war to be prolonged. The longer this war, goes on, the more they stand to gain.
Right. None of the two, Dalia, is willing to blink fast. I think I've said that a million times on this show. So just what is the situation in Sudan? What is normal or daily life like? What are you hearing, Dalia, from the ground?
food supplies, there's no work, there's no jobs, there are no incomes. People are mostly reliant on mutual aid, on community kitchens, and on humanitarian assistance. And even though those of us in the Sudanese diaspora, we help as much as we can, it's not enough, simply because the price of food supplies goes up day by day. For example, a bridge that was a major access point of food supplies getting into Khartoum was bombed. So that access for food has now been gone. So automatically, if a price of, let's say, a kilo of rice was, let's say, was $10, for example, because of this bombing of this bridge, the Jabalolia Bridge, the price of the rice has probably quadrupled. Now, who has the means to be able to get that? At the same time, 80% of the health facilities in Sudan have been rendered out of service. And if there are any health facilities that are working, they still run the risk of being attacked. And at the same time, access to medicine, to supplies. You have children. There's more than 10 million children have been out of school.
Right.
And the school system keeps, they try to get it back on track and it keeps getting postponed. So already you're talking about generational impact of this war, that because school children, their education has been affected. So already they're falling behind in regards to, their colleagues in other countries. And if you look at pregnant women, and women and girls in general, their access to sanitary pads, their access to healthcare is decimated. And there's also the high rate of rape that's been occurring.
Sexual violence.
Specifically at the hands of the RSF. So you're talking about, pregnancies, there's no rape kit protocol being followed or available. So it's a dire situation. It's catastrophic. There is no, positive news coming out of Sudan these days.
Right,
and the longer this war continues, the worse it's going to become.
Okay, and I want to interject because we have something that's positive, at least one thing, Dalia, against all odds. The Sudanese national football team, that is, let me get it right, Falcons of Jeddah, and they qualified for AFCON 2025. I mean, in 30 seconds, Dalia, what's your reaction to this? And what does this mean for the Sudanese people?
It was the shot in the arm of adrenaline and happiness and positivity that we all needed, because like you said, against all the odds, training in a country that's not their own and so on. It's the highlight for us this day, when that happened. And I think I am not exaggerating when I said there was a lot of tears being shed by so many Sudanese about what happened and how they got it. And they keep saying, we do this for the people of Sudan, we do this for those back home. And it resonates. It really resonates with us.
Right.
And I know I've spoken to several people. Those who can, they will try to go and support the team in Morocco. And you never know. Out of all of that's been happening, there's always one positive light. And this is it. This is it for us.
Indeed, light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dalia Abdelmonem. They're a political analyst. Thank you so much for your time and contribution. To South Africa now, where a controversial crackdown on illegal miners in Stilfontein has brought widespread attention to the country's natural resources, which seem to be both its biggest asset and curse. The mining sector was worth more than $55 billion in 2023. So many illegal miners are risking it all for a share of the profits, as Seho Fatso Maholaho reports.
To make ends meet, Emily Lebese's husband illegally digs this disused mine in Stilfontein for gold. But he has been trapped together with over 4,000 other miners after a police operation closed the abandoned mine shafts.
We are really sad about this situation. Those people who are trapped are our husbands, children's fathers, and neighbors. We are really sad. That is why we came together to help. Those people are not dogs. We can't throw them away. Even if they are dead, we want them to resurface so that we can bury them with dignity.
Better known as Zamazamas, or those who try, these miners have been in a standoff with the South African police for weeks.
So our people, they have left with no option but to go back to something that they know, of which is mining. So they had to make an opportunity for them to reopen those shafts illegally so that they can feed their kids. I can say the thing that makes people to come back here is poverty, unemployment.
Fearing reprisal, many illegal miners have not heeded the call to resurface. But community members say that most are unable to, as they are too weak. Some have died from dehydration and starvation. Community members have formed makeshift rescue teams to try and rescue the miners. But police are adamant about blocking basic supplies such as food and water to this mine, saying it's the only way to stop illegal mining.
I think in Northern Cape, in one single operation, we had 800 of them arrested that had, resurfaced as a result of our operations. We've seized 369 high-caliber firearms from these operations, and that tells you that these illegal miners, they're heavily armed. And that is part of the reason why we won't allow police officers and SANDF members to go down there.
Illegal gold mining cost the country nearly $4 billion in lost revenue and taxes.
What we do need is to find a just solution to this crisis. The most immediate, of course, task is to ensure a rescue team is underground. There is a safe returns of everybody to the surface, and including the rescue team themselves. And of course, we now also have to debate beyond that to say, what do we do with this situation? The reality is that we are where we are because of illegality committed first and foremost by big mining corporations that are monopolizing the private ownership of the mining and the mineral resources in this country and so on.
Politicians have been talking tough on illegal mining, going as far as to call it a national threat. A specialist task team has been assembled, but the fight seems far from over if this standoff is anything to go by. Africa Matters, Stilfontein, South Africa.
Opportunistic land grabbers are preying on small-scale rural farmers in Zambia. Traditionally, this group relied on the Farmer Input Support Program to access fertilizer, seeds, and sometimes pesticides at a minimal cost. But drought has decimated many farms, leaving some unable to pay the $15 a month fee, which is where the opportunists come in. Fungisai Maronga is in Zambia with more.
Agnes Lubunde, a local farmer working tirelessly to provide for her family, says the drought has deeply affected many like her. She's one of many scrambling to gather the funds needed for vital inputs, the supplies needed for farming. What was meant to support farmers as they prepare for the season has turned into a significant challenge, forcing many to make tough sacrifices just to stay afloat.
Many of us have struggled during this drought, and we have no choice but to find ways to pay for the farming inputs. We often join groups to buy in bulk, but for others, the only option is to sell a portion of their land just to make enough to support their families and contribute to the program.
Zambia has endured a prolonged drought for several years, with some regions experiencing a 50% drop in rainfall. This has devastated farmers, leaving them with failed crops and food insecurity, making it increasingly difficult to recover and plan for future seasons.
The lack of rain has greatly affected our source of income, so we are unable to contribute to the initiative. Even finding work has become difficult, as more established farmers are not hiring. We have nowhere else to turn for money.
Agnes and Killian are just two of the many farmers in rural areas caught in this scramble for farming supplies. Agricultural experts encourage farmers to join small associations to protect themselves from opportunists attempting to take advantage of their needs.
It is believed that when you are alone, you are easily defeated. But when you are in a team or in a group or cooperative, there is some kind of protection. So that anticipation is not really seen in cooperatives. And that's how you see our farmers complain bitterly Even in cooperatives, they are not well protected.
Zambia's severe dry spell has left small-scale farmers with poor yields, leading to food insecurity and financial strain as they struggle to afford essential farming inputs. While efforts are underway to build farmers' resilience beyond hand-to-mouth survival, many are left with no choice but to sell their land to access government support, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation. Fungisai Maranga, Africa Matters, Lusaka, Zambia.
And staying in the region, we head to Zimbabwe now, which is no stranger to drought. It severely affects agriculture in a country where nearly half the population, or nearly 8 million people, depend on food assistance. However, farmers are adopting innovative practices to make the most of the erratic rainfall, as Rumesa Choda reports.
Gertrude Siduna is among the many farmers in Chipinge district of Zimbabwe who are turning to drought-resistant crops, and it's changing the way she works the land.
I started growing chilies at the irrigation garden. We didn't know about it until some experts introduced the chili pepper to us. They gave us some seedlings for our nurseries and they guided us through the entire process.
The 49-year-old was trained by the agriculture program funded by U.S. Agency for International Development. So far, she's earned about $400 from growing the drought-resistant crop.
I just pick it from the fields and take it to the Cargill processing center close to my home. It's simple. I get my money, which I then use to buy cornmeal. I just use my earnings from chilies to buy it from the local shops. Chilies are far much better than corn.
Community gardens are becoming more widespread, with supports from various initiatives and solar-powered irrigation systems. They are enabling farmers to produce a higher yield.
The solar technology has been quite helpful. We were struggling to fetch water from the rivers using buckets, and right now the rivers are dry, so the solar technology helps us. We now have easy access to reliable water that flows from the taps.
Zimbabwe harvested about 700,000 tons of corn this year. That's down 70% from last season. Officials aim to expand maize cultivation to 1.8 million hectares by planting drought-resistant varieties and promoting sustainable practices to better cope with the climate crisis.
U.S. government spends billions of dollars trying to address the global food crisis. It's really important because of the importance of addressing poverty, malnutrition, and hunger that we are leveraging our collective resources to be able to address these issues.
Zimbabwean farmers like Siduna are not only trying to adapt to climate challenges, but also laying the groundwork for a more sustainable and food-secure future. Rumesa Chodar, Africa Matters.
To the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo next, where plastic waste is not only clogging the Ruzizi hydroelectric dam, but it's also causing power cuts and disrupting businesses. Obaida Hito has more.
It might look like these plastic bottles have been collected and assembled for recycling. But these hundreds of bottles, jerry cans, and other debris are all waste. And they are choking the life out of the Ruzizi hydroelectric dam, situated at the southern end of Lake Kivu, while causing endless disruption all around, particularly at the National Electricity Company.
This waste practically blocks the water. Water has difficulty entering the forced conduits to provide the pressure and speed required for the machines. During this time, we reach our limit. We are forced to shut down the machines and start removing the waste, clearing the grates. And when we stop the machines, power outages also occur.
Here we have 4 machines, and together these 4 machines produce a total of 29.8 megawatts. This waste materials affects all 4 machines at once. That's why the cleaning operation for the grates and machines take around 6 to 7 hours. On each machine, we might spend around 2.5 hours, or 2 hours if we work faster and there is not too much trash.
And local businesses have not been spared either.
Our bosses are pressing us because of delays in completing their orders, and we don't know what to do. The workshop is here, but we can't do any welding when there is no power. People tell us the power is out because of plastic bottles, But we don't know what to do about these bottles. If only there were a way to clear out these bottles so we could have electricity.
Divers often have to clean the bottom of the river to prevent turbines from becoming blocked up by waste accumulating at a depth of 14 meters.
We urge the population to monitor and properly manage household waste, because if they leave this waste lying in the street, in the gutters, it ends up at the Ruzizi Dam, and this creates a lot of difficulties for us.
But the waste poses an even greater danger to people's health and the environment here. Veto, Africa Matters.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode, or ideas on what you'd like us to cover on YouTube or on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Grace Kuria Kanja.